Dear classics, today we'll continue the chapter 4 where we'll see today friction, alright, and its advantages and disadvantages, okay, its disadvantages and advantages, alright. And in the last session we talked about the definition of friction, and also friction to be said is a necessary evil. Okay, why it is? Because friction has both advantages and disadvantages. All right, so we sometimes need it, sometimes we don't need it. Without friction we cannot do some of the works where friction has to be there. In some cases it becomes a burden. So that's the reason why, friction is said to be a necessary evil. So today now we'll directly go into its disadvantages first. Alright, so here number 1, friction wears away the soles of our shoes. Okay, in the beginning itself, when we had a talk about the definition of friction, that time I tried to make it clear with this example. See, when we walk on a road, so that time what happens is that the friction is formed between the soles of our shoes and the surface of the road, okay, which makes us able to walk no matter it is there. But in the meantime, what happens is that the soles of our shoes wear away. Okay, the soles of our shoes wear away, which means the soles get damaged. So we need to buy the new shoes. All right. So that way, it is not good, which means it is one of the disadvantages. Number 2, a person may fall due to less friction. So sometimes we need more friction, sometimes we need less friction. So here, in this case, less friction is not good. Why? Because when we walk, okay, when we walk on the road, that time, if the friction doesn't form there between the soles of our shoes and the surface of the road on which we are walking, then what happens that we may not be able to walk there, or we will slip there and fall off. All right, so there has to be the friction. If the friction is less also, it discomforts us to walk there on the road. Okay, so it has to be the, sometimes we happen to step on a banana skin. So that time what happens? We slip and fall off, which is because of the less friction formed between the soles of our shoes and the banana skin. Alright, so third one we have friction wears out the rubbing machine parts. Friction wears out the rubbing machine parts. So machine out here, usually complex machine where you find the number of parts functioning there inside. That means when machine has to work, number of parts there inside have to move. Alright, have to rub, have to move out there where those parts rub on each other. They rub on each other like that. So that time those parts which are rubbing on each other wear out and the machine gets damaged. In the same way, you see, example I am giving you, the gears of our car. Okay, you must have seen the gears of your car. So there, the gear has to be changed every time. So that time, because of the movement of the parts of the gears, what happens? The gears, those parts there in the gears get damaged inside because of the friction formed in between those parts. All right, then we have friction produces heat. Friction produces heat. So again, in those machines where the parts are moving, okay, where the parts are moving inside, because of the movement of those parts and because of the rubbing on each other, a lot of heat is produced. A lot of heat is produced, which damages the machine. Okay, which damages the machine. All right, then we have friction slows down motion. Friction slows down machine. All right, so here again talking about the machine where you find the number of parts. When these parts move their inside, okay, in order to execute the work, that time because of the friction, the motion of those parts slows down. Consequently, the work done by the machine itself becomes very slow, where we cannot finish our work in the time. So that way it sometimes brings about a use loss in our work, which is also not good. All right, then we have the sixth one out here is friction reduces the efficiency of machine. Friction reduces the efficiency of machine. Machine has to be very efficient so that the work done by that machine is always good for us, and that gives us a lot of profit. But sometimes what happens is that that machine doesn't work efficiently because of the friction there. So in order to overcome this, sometimes we apply the force. Okay, sometimes we apply the force out there or to those machines from some external sources, and those forces also sometimes get wasted, okay, in order to overcome the friction there, okay, which reduces the efficiency of those machines, which is also not good. So that way this friction bring about lot of disadvantages or loss in our life. All right, so there are many other examples, but I think these many advantages would be enough for our standard. All right, so these are the disadvantages of the friction in our day-to-day life. All right. Okay, now let's talk about advantages. There are many advantages, but here we have 5 advantages. Let's get started now. Friction enables us to walk without sleeping. This means it is because of the friction we are able to walk properly without sleeping. Okay, if there is no friction between the soles of our shoes and the road on which we are walking, then there is every chance of slipping and falling. But it usually doesn't happen so. Why? Because there is friction. So we need friction to walk properly. Okay, but sometimes we happen to walk on the smooth surface, okay, a very polished surface. So in such case, what happens is that there is less friction, so sometimes we happen to slip and fall off. Okay, but whatever it is, for a smooth or comfortable walk, we need to have friction there between the soles of our shoes and the road. All right. Second, we have friction enables us to write and draw on paper. It is because of friction only we are able to write and draw on papers. If there is no friction between the tip of the pencil or pen and the paper, then we are not able to write or draw on the papers. So we need to have the friction there. Okay, it is all because of the friction only we can make the good handwriting out there. We can draw a good pictures. Okay, you must have experienced that suppose in number of your days, in your number of classes, you must have experienced that you are writing on a smooth paper. Okay, the papers are too slippery, so you are not able to make good handwritings. You are not able to draw good diagrams. It's all because of the friction, because of less friction there, due to the slippery edge of your paper or slippery surface of your paper. So you need to have the friction there between the tip of your pen and the paper in order to make good handwriting there. Okay, then we have friction enables us to burn a matchstick. So when you have to burn a matchstick also, there has to be the friction between the tip of the matchstick and the side of the matchbox. Okay, so until and unless the friction is formed between these two, then the matchstick cannot be burned. Okay, for example, I am showing you here. See, when I rub this, so it is now burnt. Why? Because there was a friction formed between the tip of this matchstick and the side of this matchbox. Okay, so then only it was able to burn. Okay, it's all because of the friction formed between these two points, this one and this side. All right, so that's because of the friction. Then friction enables us to cut wood with saw. Suppose we need to cut wood with saw. Okay, so there has to be the friction between the blade of the saw and the wood. Okay, see here. Suppose, see, we have to cut a wood with this saw. There has to be friction between this blade, okay, between this blade and the wood. Then only the wood can be cut. All right. Then the last advantage of friction that we have here is the very important one. This friction enables us to apply brakes and stop a moving vehicle. So when your vehicle is running or moving on the road, so if the friction is not formed between the brake shoes, if the friction is not formed between the brake shoes are usually like this, and the rim of the wheel, then your vehicle cannot stop there. Alright, so there has to be friction formed between this, your brake shoes and the rim of this wheel in order to stop a moving vehicle. Okay, what happens out here is that when the brake is applied, that time this brake shoes rub on this rim of the wheel. Okay, which means there is the friction formed between these two, your brake shoes and the rim of this wheel, which only makes the vehicle stop there. Otherwise your vehicle keeps on moving unless it bangs the wall or falls off the road. Okay, so these are the advantages of friction. All right. Okay, now we'll see types of friction. Okay, types of friction. Okay, so here we have static and sliding friction, and the other one is rolling friction. Okay, static and sliding and rolling friction. Okay, static friction. Static friction means the friction formed between the two surfaces of the objects when they are at stationary. That means when they are at rest, when they are not moving. So that time, suppose here you find the two surfaces of these two objects. Okay, so there is still the friction between these two objects. All right, so the friction formed between these two objects at that moment is called static friction. All right, so when it has to move, when these objects have to move on the surface of the other objects out here, then the force has to come, another force has to come, which should be more than the static force. Then only it can move. See here. Suppose the force, here, if I have to move this object on this surface, on the surface of this object, so there is every time the force, the opposite force being applied by the surface of this object to the surface of this object which is on the top, which is now trying to move. All right, so if I have to move this object, that time the force applied by me should be more than the force applied by this surface. All right, so here, so when you have to move it, then what you do, you will apply the force more than this, then only it will move. Okay, so to move this, if this object is sliding like that, okay, sliding like that. So that time another frictional force is formed, which is called sliding force, like that. It slides on the surface of this, object. So that time also the force is forming, the frictional force is forming. So that time the force which is forming because of the sliding of this is called sliding force. All right. Then second one is your rolling force. When the objects roll over the surface of another object, okay, so that time the friction formed between these two surfaces of these two objects in contact is called rolling friction, okay, rolling friction. So here rolling friction formed at the time of rolling, of something on some surface is lesser than the sliding friction. That's why usually when there is heavy object, so that time instead of sliding and lifting, it is better to, or it is easier to roll the object. Okay, we have seen the big heavy objects provided with the bearings or the wheel on its bottom, okay, on its bottom or on the lower surface of its so that when you apply the little force there, that time it can be easily pulled or pushed, okay. So there the rolling friction formed is very less. So these are the two types of frictional force we have: static and sliding friction and the rolling friction. Okay, that's all about the friction. So today we'll do only this one. So here no need to learn the definition of this static and sliding friction out here and the rolling friction also. You just got to know the types. There are only two types of this friction. They are static and sliding friction and rolling friction. You just got to know the types of friction only. Okay, you don't need to learn the definitions out here. Okay, so at the end I just would like to give you the homework out here. Okay, write two advantages and two disadvantages of friction. Okay, so today we'll do only this much. Thank you very much.